Good morning. Okay, I'm a little nervous. I've preached in front of a Spanish congregation, but not so much in this congregation. So as was mentioned, I have some experience with theology and peace. I'm entering my final year at AMBS. Praise God, I can't do it another year. And here I've learned, even before my studies, I worked in conflict transformation stuff. And so between the theology of school and my previous practice, I was able to build some bridges. And so as I was preparing, I was like, okay, this can't just be me like talking at y'all, just telling you what is said in the Bible. I've got to bring in some skills-based stuff here. So my goals of this sermon are to provide you with possibly a new understanding of what wisdom is and can be, and also maybe give y'all some ideas of how to implement this in your daily lives. I chose this passage because I feel like King Solomon a lot. Not that I'm like a king or a queen or in any position of power like that, but my parents are pastors. I don't know why I am here. I am going to guess that it is because they anointed me and prayed over me when I was a child, much like King Solomon. And so hence he followed his father, King David's footsteps. I have also prayed a lot this year. I turned 32 earlier this year, and I was like, wow, I am a child. I make a fool of myself too much. I don't know what I'm saying half the time. I need to pray for wisdom. And I understood wisdom to be this thing that was external to me. It was just, I needed to have a quiet demeanor. I needed to speak profound things. I needed to, just always have my thoughts collected. And in reality, that's not so. Wisdom is actually a lot more achievable than I assumed it was. So I am going to read this passage. I chose the whole prayer that Solomon had for wisdom, but there's one specific verse that I'm going to emphasize, and that's verse 9. So I'll go ahead and read it, and then we'll just dive in. At Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream by night, and God said, "Ask what I should give you." And Solomon said, "You have shown great and steadfast love to your servant, my father David, because he walked before you in faithfulness and righteousness and in uprightness of heart toward you. And you have kept him for this great and steadfast love, and have given him a son to sit on his throne today. And now, O Lord my God, you have made your servant king in place of my father David. Although I am only a little child, I do not know how to go out or come in. And your servant is in the midst of the people whom you have chosen, a great people, so numerous they cannot be numbered or counted. Give your servant, therefore, an understanding mind to govern your people, able to discern between good and evil. For who can govern this your great people?" It pleased the Lord that Solomon had asked this. God said to him, "Because you have asked this and have not asked for yourself long life or riches or for the life of your enemies, but have asked for yourself understanding to discern what is right, I now do according to your word. Indeed, I give you a wise and discerning mind. No one like you has been before you, and no one like you shall arise after you. I give you also what you have not asked, both riches and honor all your life. No other king shall compare with you. If you walk in my ways, keeping my statutes and my commandments, as your father David walked, then I will lengthen your life." I'm reading the NRSV. Okay, cool, it's NRSV. So again, I'm going to focus on verse 9, the part where King Solomon says what he's asking for. "Give your servant, therefore, an understanding mind to govern your people, able to discern between good and evil." In the world of conflict and peace and justice, I'm just going to say people are just the most difficult creatures to understand. We are very complex, okay? So I did some digging. When I was preparing this, I was like, okay, what does understanding mean? And of course, I said, well, understanding means to understand, duh. And that's not clear enough. So I did some Googling, and Google told me, obviously we know this, that understanding is a verb. It's something that you do. I oftentimes look at synonyms to a word because that helps me to understand a little bit more of a broad scope of how this word can be applied. And so some synonyms to understanding is the act of comprehending. It is the act of being insightful or perceptive. It is also being compassionate and empathetic. So I don't understand why understanding is so difficult. When we're told that it's just being insightful and perceptive and being empathetic. And it's very challenging to understand people, especially when we're in conflict. So in my work and in my studies, there are a couple of observations I've made. People oftentimes get into conflicts because there is a lack of understanding. That's one thing. The second thing is that we don't know how to understand each other better. There's a gap in our skills, and we just kind of talk in circles, saying the same thing over and over again. Our emotions get heightened. We don't know what we're doing, and at the end of the day, we're just like, okay, I'm done talking to you. I'm over this. I'm not going to talk about this anymore. We're going to ignore the problem. I'm going to avoid the conflict, or we're just going to harbor bad feelings towards each other because of this thing that we don't know how to understand or even understand how to understand. So I want to make a caveat here. Not all conflicts are from a lack of understanding. Some things are just plain out ignorance and stupidity. Genocide is one example, racism is another, discrimination is another. There is no excuse for it. A lack of understanding, no. You need to go educate yourself. That's what that is. I'm sorry if that was a little harsh. So I'm going to be speaking specifically within the scope of conflict and how to resolve it, some basic skills when it comes to communication and interpersonal or intrapersonal things. We have to do this stuff with ourselves before we can ever do this with somebody else. There's a book by Betty Price, I can't remember, Price, and it's called The Space Between Us. And in this book, she explains what she calls the architecture of the self. And it's these different parts of us. So I'm going to try not to talk too much. I'm going to try and get to my points. So the first part of ourself is our descriptive self. Our descriptive self is our character, it's our birth story, it's our history, it's how we got here, it's our character, our strengths and limitations, and blah, blah, blah. The second part of ourself is our defended self. Our defended self is essentially the part of us that is shaped by life. It's the things around us that shape us, our experiences, nature and nurture, all of the things. It is the result of the hurt we've experienced, discrimination, trauma, etc. Betty calls it our second skin. She says this is where our ego, our shame, and our vulnerable self exist. This is where our emotions and our unmet needs live. Now, emotions and unmet needs are very important in conflict. Usually conflict happens because there are heightened emotions and sometimes unmet needs. So it is the defended self that we oftentimes show to the world. It's the part that it's what shaped our thinking, that's what about others and ourselves. It's our interactions. It shapes how we interact with each other. In conflict, what shows most is our defended self. It is this part of us that we typically show to others, but in conflict, this part of us takes center stage, okay? There is no getting around it. Now, the deeper self, this is our inner self. Most people might say this is where God lives in each of us. This is the part of ourselves that we have to get to know. We have to get to know this part of ourselves in order to be able to live into this deeper self, which Betty describes as the birthplace of all goodness, all generosity, and grace. Maybe it's where wisdom lives too. I don't know. Maybe when I speak to God, I'll ask him. So in the act of understanding, how do we understand each other better? When we're in our descriptive self, but we want to tap into our deeper self, when our emotions are heightened, how do we understand each other better? So the first thing, this is the skills part of this, is to listen. A lot of y'all might know it as active listening when I work with kids, because I oftentimes work with kids, not MYF, they are young adults. I'm talking about kids. Kids, with them, I often say it is listening on purpose. It is listening with my full self. It is noticing what they are saying both verbally and non-verbally. It is their body language, their tone, the words they're using. It is whether they have their arms crossed, whether they're making eye contact, etc. I want to know everything that they're saying. The second part of this skills thing is paraphrasing. I want to make sure that I am hearing this person correctly, both all of their verbal and nonverbal stuff. Most of the times, paraphrasing gets confused with summarizing. The difference between summarizing and paraphrasing within my world is that summarizing is just regurgitating the main points of something. It is not getting at the broader scope of things. It is not listening. It's not showing that we understand what the person is saying on a deeper level. It's not getting their emotions. It's not getting their needs. It's just, okay, this is what you said, and I'm going to tell you what you said. It's not understanding. It's not being insightful. It's not empathizing. It is just kind of like brushing over. I don't know if that made sense. Hopefully it did. So in this act of trying to understand, I mentioned that our feelings and needs, emotions and unmet needs, they kind of blur things. So there's something in the world of, I learned this in trauma studies, this theory called the vagus nerve theory. The vagus nerve is something that goes from our brain to every organ and every major organ in our body. And what happens is that when I see someone, okay, that reminds me of someone I don't like, my vagus nerve is acting up. My brain is remembering all of the reasons why I do not like this one person, and it's sending signals that trigger emotions throughout my body. So let's say, this never happened, this is just an example I'm pulling out of thin air. When I was in high school, there was this one girl who, she would always pick on me. She was just a bully. And then now, 32 years old, I see someone that looks like her, to a T. And it's not her, but she looks like her. My body, my brain is going to remember, even before I realize that I am remembering, okay? But did I say that right? Anyways, we'll keep going. Before I realize logically, my body, I'm sweating. My stomach is hurting. I'm like thinking of what is my escape route. That is the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is sending all of these signals through my body being like, you need to get ready to defend yourself. Run, right? That's what Phil just said. Sometimes you gotta run. The thing that happens with our emotions is that it is triggered not just by people that might remind us of another person, but it's also triggered by words, it's triggered by a tone, it's triggered by body language, it's triggered by just so much stuff. Again, we're very difficult to understand. And our emotions work faster than our logic does. That's just the way it is, and everyone has emotional reactions. You can deny it, but the reality is that if you are a human being, you are an emotional creature. Therefore, your body is going to have emotional reactions, whether you realize it or not. What needs to be understood is that if we are not realizing that we're having emotional reactions, then our logical self is not able to function well. And so what's going to happen is that we're going to perpetuate harm, we're going to perpetuate anger, we're not going to think through things logically, we're not going to be able to understand. We're not going to be able to empathize. So under every emotion is typically an unmet need, okay? I needed for this girl to stop bullying me in high school. I needed for her to apologize. In this space, I need to, if I see her, right? This is, again, a fictional story. It's not real. But if I were to see her again, my need in that moment would be that I need to make sure that I am safe and that I am protected. Every emotion has underlying needs. Now, some unmet needs are the result of, they show themselves through like anger, sadness, frustration, etc. An example, this again, well, maybe it's happened, I don't know. I'm married. My husband and I, we work a lot. I'm in school, he works, we're just doing a lot of things. We try to make intentional time together. Every few weeks, we'll try and go on a date night or walk or whatever, and so date night gets canceled. He can't do it. He forgot he had a soccer game. He loves soccer. He's like, I'm gonna go play soccer. I live with you, I spend all the time with you, I'm gonna go hang out with my friends, I'm gonna play soccer. I'm gonna get mad. And I'm gonna be like, forget you, go play soccer. I don't wanna hang out with you anyways. That would probably not be my response. But the reality is that I am discouraged. I'm like, dang, I was totally, completely prepared to hang out with you for the evening, and now you canceled on me to go play soccer, and now I'm mad. So what's happening there? My needs, I'm feeling discouraged. That's showing up in anger, and my need is that I need intentional time and conversation. So there's a way to go about saying that. Okay, well, I'm feeling pretty discouraged that you're canceling this date night. I was really looking forward to it because I feel like I need some time. I need some conversation with you. Like, I just need to hang out with you. Maybe in the future, we can, like within the next couple of days, we can plan a date night and you can, reschedule your soccer game or whatever. That is an example of unmet needs and how our emotional reactions oftentimes get the better of us, and an example of how we can do better at controlling our emotional reactions. Now, met needs oftentimes show themselves in happiness and feeling fulfilled and joyful and grateful, and when people dance, there's oftentimes some sense of happiness and joy that comes along with it. Now, what we need to understand is that we must acknowledge our feelings, we must learn to regulate them, and we must work towards gaining clarity for what we need. Again, if we can't do this for ourselves, then we can't do this for other people. If we don't understand ourselves, we cannot understand other people. Therefore, tapping into that wisdom that is almost accessible becomes inaccessible because we are failing ourselves and our neighbor. Now, I also believe in accountability, and that takes a lot of humility. So one of the things that I admire about King Solomon is he starts with humility from the jump. He's like, Lord, I'm not here because I did anything right. I'm here because I was anointed, I was prayed for, and you put me here, and now I need your guidance. What we need to do in the middle of conflict, and oftentimes what I might fail to do, is we need to pray. Lord, I don't know what I'm doing. I am a child. I do not know how to come in, and I do not know how to go out. I need your guidance. My emotions are running rampant. I do not know how to control them. I cannot think logically right now, and what I really want to do is I want to make assumptions and I want to lash out. And that's not right. We need to work better at understanding. So being humble enough to accept that maybe we aren't always handling things well. We aren't understanding people. We need to gain some clarity. We need to clarify what we're trying to do. We need to take a moment and regulate our emotions. We need to figure out what our unmet needs are, etc. That takes a lot of humility, especially when we need to apologize. My husband and I, we grew up in obviously different households, different cultures, different religions. We handle conflict very differently. And it's taken a lot for him to learn how to apologize, to hold himself accountable, to realize like, oh wait, I'm not doing that right, I didn't do that right, I didn't have that conversation right, I ignored you, whatever, I apologize. To hold oneself accountable takes a lot of humility. We are called to be humble, not just in our appearance, not just in our actions, but also in our words. Holding ourselves accountable is one way to be humble. And to recognize, like, maybe sometimes we need some help. Most of the time, I need help. I want to say, one of the things that I do is I work in intercultural competency and undoing racism at AMBS, and that's a lot of words. one of the things with feelings, needs, conflicts, I mentioned that some of the things are just conflicts or just because of ignorance. The roots of white supremacy run very, very, very deep. It is very important that in our enacting and our embodying of being wise, of being understanding, we should not always expect that when there is a conflict or when somebody is angry, especially a person of color, that it is for no reason, or if they lash out and we feel some type of way, that all of a sudden they need to apologize. I'm going to put that out there, and I'm just going to say that we need to be interculturally competent, and we need to understand that people of color are not always the ones that need to apologize. If anything, I mean, I'm Puerto Rican, but we need to apologize a lot. Like, let me rephrase that. People of color should hold themselves accountable, and they should be held accountable. But also, especially as Christians, and just stating the obvious, most of y'all are white. White Christians also need to hold themselves accountable and not expect that people of color hold themselves accountable and apologize. That is, I'm just going to put that out there. We can have more conversations about that if y'all want. I'm not trying to offend anyone with those words. Okay. Now, discernment is one of the other words in verse 9 that I'm going to focus on. Discernment essentially is just judging well, being able to judge well. So we need to realize when we're going into a conflict or when we're in a conflict, how do we go? What do we do? What do we say? How do we say it? That takes discernment. Is this the right time? Is this the right place? Are they going to understand if I were to engage with them in a way that is seeking resolution? There are some people that really, it's not worth it. We're going to spend our time and our energy trying to, there are also not just people, topics that we just don't need to get into it. I recently had an experience with a dear loved one, and we have very different political perspectives. And they were sending videos, they were saying things, and in texts, and I was just like, I didn't engage it. Thank you so much for sharing your opinion. I appreciate it. I love you, and I'll talk to you later. That made them mad. It's not worth it, though. I could argue, I could send videos back, I could send long text, but what's going to happen is that we're just going to go in this roundabout thing. It's going to be circular because we just have different political ideologies. And it is what it is. There are some conversations that are worth it, some conversations that aren't, and there are some people that are worth it, and there are some people that aren't. That's just the reality of it. We need to be able to discern what are the conversations that are worth it, and who should we invest all of this energy into. Conflict isn't easy, it's not fun. However, it is inevitable. We're feeble human creatures. We don't understand ourselves. It's very difficult to understand each other. That makes conflict inevitable in this life. We need to understand and discern what are the positive ways of dealing with this and what are the negative ways of dealing with this. Okay. I'm almost done. So, I realized in one of these conversations, I have a few, I mentioned some things are worth it, some things aren't. I have a few loved ones that I haven't talked to in a while. And there's a couple of them where I'm like, man, I just don't even know if it's worth it. Like, really, do I really want to invest that energy? Like, I'd rather just not talk to them. Like, in all reality, I'm just going to avoid it. Maybe that's not healthy, but in this situation, in this case, it is. There's other people where it's worth it. I want to invest that time. I want to invest that energy, but now is not the right time. Again, discernment. But it was in this thinking where I was like, man, it's just whatever. Like, you know what? They don't want to talk to me. I don't want to talk to them. If they don't want to deal with it, if they don't want to be mature, I'm not going to be mature either. Forget them. I don't care. And I realized, I was praying about it, and I'm like, Lord, I feel very angry about this. And I realized that Jesus didn't argue with anyone. Jesus said some profound things, but Jesus didn't argue with them. And Jesus always chooses a relationship. Always, 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 always. Jesus chooses to be in relationship with someone before he would say, okay, forget you. I'm done. I'm over you. I don't care what happens to you. Jesus always chooses to be in relationship. Sometimes that relationship just means that we got to be at a distance. I'll talk to you. I'll say hi from over here. Please don't come closer. When we're in this place of not knowing what to do, having a lack of understanding, in conflict, whether it be political conflict, emotional conflict, communication conflict, whatever it is, we must remember that the greatest commandment is, and the second greatest commandment is, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your mind, with all your heart, with all your mind, and with all your soul, and to love your neighbor as yourself. Again, if we don't know how to love ourselves, if we don't understand ourselves, it's going to be very difficult to understand another person and love them well. And there's also, the Bible is very explicit in what love is. The first example that I thought of is 1 Corinthians chapter 13. Love is patient, love is kind, love is blah, 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 blah. So why is this important? This is important because King Solomon is in a position of leadership. He is a king governing a whole people. Now, we might not be in that type of position, but I guarantee that you govern your households. I guarantee that you probably have some influence over your workplace or wherever you volunteer, the people in that space, over friendships, relationships with kids, with extended family, in-laws, etc. Governing isn't just, I'm in a position of power, I am in a position of, I am king or queen or boss or whatever. Governing happens in all the ways because we have an influence over each other. Governing, to some degree, is shepherding. We are called to be shepherds. And so in this act of shepherding, as Mennonites, as historically the Peace Church, we need to know how to do this well in our everyday lives. And again, that starts with the self, tapping into our deeper self, understanding where we came from, who we are, not just what is my favorite food and what color do I like, but what are my triggers? What are my biases? What is my emotional language? How do I understand people? How do I engage with them? It's getting to know all the things. Because once I am able to govern myself, have control over my own emotions and my own mind and my own tongue, then I have a greater influence of doing that to somebody else in a positive way, not a negative way. I love Matthew chapter 23, verses 25 through 28, and this just exemplifies why this is so important. So this is when Jesus was talking to the Pharisees. I'm pretty sure, no, this isn't, never mind, I'm thinking of a different one. So I'm gonna read it real quick. It's powerful. When I told you that Jesus didn't argue, but he had profound words, this is one of those places where I was like, man, Jesus, that was harsh, but it's true. Jesus said, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees." These are not kings. They are scribes and Pharisees. They are people of influence. "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you clean the outside of the cup and of the plate, but inside they are full of greed and self-indulgence. You blind Pharisee, first clean the inside of the cup so that the outside also may become clean. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you are like whitewashed tombs, which on the outside look beautiful, but inside they are full of the bones of the dead and of all kinds of filth. So you also on the outside look righteous to others, but inside you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness." That can hurt. That can sting a little bit. If we are not humbling ourselves to recognize, like, okay, Lord, I don't know what I'm doing, This world is full of people who really make me mad and that I want to argue with. Like, I need your guidance. I need your help regulating my emotions. I need your help knowing how to respond to people. I need your help being able to discern things, what I'm doing, where I'm going, what I'm saying, who I'm saying it to, and why. When we're in that position, we are getting closer to grasping what wisdom is. Okay. So another reason why this is important is because we live in a political and social climate right now that is mean. When I tell you it is mean, it is so mean, it is ridiculous. You could say one wrong thing and all of a sudden you're canceled. Now, what is canceled? I had to Google that. It's when people are against you. And people don't like not being liked. Okay, everyone is out here trying to either be liked or they're perpetuating harmful and hateful things. As a peace church, how do we do this? Why are we doing this? Why is it important? Why are we called to embody wisdom in the way that we understand and in the way that we discern? And I like to think of Matthew 5:13. So I'm going to offer you this. You are called to be the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how can its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything, but it is thrown out and trampled underfoot. If we're not doing the work that we need to do internally, then to be able to understand, to be able to govern well, to be able to discern well, to be agents of what is true peace and justice by speaking and acting in ways that are wise, then what is the point of us calling ourselves Christians or Mennonites? Why would we claim that when we're not embodying what that fully means? So I went on a deep dive because I was like, salt. Like salt, you use too much salt, it's not good. I sometimes oversalt my food and I'm like, oh man, Omar, I don't know if we can eat this tonight for dinner. So anyways, I went on to do a theological deep dive into what is salt. I'm almost done. I said that a while ago, but I'm really almost done. So the first purpose of salt in the Bible is to purify and cleanse. Just how having communication skills and emotionally competent and doing the work of being interculturally competent and undoing any racism within ourselves and understanding that we need to start with ourselves before we can really do well with others, that is the act of purifying and cleansing. I grew up in a church where there was a lot of you could feel the Holy Spirit. Like, the Holy Spirit was roaming and it was palpable. And so I realized at a young age that if we are agents of peace and justice as Christians, as believers in God, trying to do what is right in the world, then we have a legion of God's army right behind us. And what that means is that any space that we go into and the Holy Spirit is not, there's a palpable shift. We're agents of not only of purified and cleansed individuals, but also we are purifying and cleansing the space around us. Again, that means that if we're governing well, then we need to be agents who are managing ourselves well. We need to be cleansed and purified. The second thing about salt is that it seasons. One of my favorite stories in the Bible is from the book of Ezekiel, and the title of it is The Valley of Dry Bones. One of the reasons I love this passage is because, it's just speaking life into dry bones. We have the power, we have this gift in our mind, in our heart, and in our tongue to speak life into individuals who are feeling broken, who are feeling upset, who are feeling angry. When we are in conflict, we have this power to speak positivity, to speak life, to bring the Holy Spirit into the conversation. Salt seasons, okay? So make every word, every thought, every action be kind. It needs to be salt. It needs to be kind, generous, thoughtful, gentle, patient, whatever, blah, 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 love 1 Corinthians chapter 13. The last thing is that salt preserves. It's really hard to, in this world that is very, very harsh, especially in this climate where there's a lot of things happening. I know a lot of us feel passionate about Palestine, about the siege on Gaza. There are a lot of people who feel passionate about Israel being okay doing that. How do we have these conversations? How do we have these conversations, especially without losing our cool? And that requires us to remain preserved in who we know God to be. If God is a God of justice, if God is a God of peace, if God is a God of wisdom, then it would be very unwise to act in a way that is not peaceful and that actually perpetuates injustice. Injustice isn't something that is just out there. We are agents of doing justice. We are agents of doing peace in our everyday lives. We are agents. We have the potential to embody this wisdom and these very, I don't want to say basic because they're not basic, but in these very accessible ways. Okay, so in conclusion, I'm done now. In conclusion, wisdom is done and shown in a variety of ways. It is choosing to understand well, to discern righteously, and respond lovingly. These are different ways that we can act out what it is to be wise. By doing these things, we are being the salt of the world and shepherding in ways that honor God. In verse, it says that King Solomon prayed for wisdom, understanding, and discernment, and the Lord was pleased that this was his prayer. He didn't pray for long life or riches or the lives of his enemies. What he prayed for was wisdom. He was praying for guidance and how to shepherd God's people. Now, praying for this, doing these things, it doesn't only impact us as individuals, it has the power to impact our surroundings near and far and for generations. It is because of King David and King David's love for God and vice versa, that it was because of King David's wisdom that King Solomon is on the throne. Of course, it's because of God's grace. But we know that if we're reading about King Solomon, that his reputation of being wise was known all over the place. It was this one queen who came to him and visited him, and she brought how much stuff? She brought a lot of stuff, okay? It was a gift to him, all because of his wisdom. I think that's pretty cool. So being wise is choosing peaceful resolutions and transformative practices in order to do what is justice, or what is just. And that requires prayer. I'm pretty sure it's the Apostle Paul who says to pray without ceasing. We can pray for wisdom. I would say be selfish. Pray for wisdom for yourself. We need it. This world is not easy. It takes away our wisdom. It has the power to pull me out of character a lot. Last Sunday, after church, I was driving on the highway home, and this person was in the left lane on the highway going under the speed limit. And I was like, Lord, give me patience. He finally moved over to the right lane, and he flicked me off. And I wanted to do that right back. This world has the power to just take us out of character. That was after church. The evil, the hurt, the pain, the anger in this world has the power to cause us to act out, to not be wise. So what we need to do is be a little selfish and pray for wisdom. Wisdom in how we speak and how we act, in our thoughts and our feelings, how we're controlling ourselves, how we're influencing others, all of that has an impact. Now, don't just always be selfish. Pray for wisdom for yourself and also for your neighbors. They need it. Homeboy on the highway needed it really bad. I didn't pray for it, and now I reflect, and I'm like, dang, I should have prayed for it then, and I should, not just for me, but for him too. So, I leave you with maybe a new understanding of what wisdom is and how accessible wisdom is. It isn't just profound words and a quiet demeanor. That's great. I don't have it. So I thought that wisdom was way out there and I was never achievable. And it just so happens that wisdom is very accessible. We just have to remember that it is on our tongues. It is in our feelings. It is in how we use our logic. It is in our actions. And through being wise, through these various skills mentioned, we have the power to be agents of peace and justice. We have the power to be who we're called to be in this world. Therefore, honoring God. Okay, thank you, folks.